All right, so no, it's not the most fun thing to talk about, technology, but it is very important. Because of the way in which the ways in which we look at the microbiome have evolved drastically just over the last 13 years or so. The technology is constantly pivoting and changing. So it's important for us as clinicians to stay on top of new and emerging advances, and so that we're better able to care for the patients that we're seeing and treating. Okay, give me 1 second. I've got someone coming in. Okay. So I muted everyone, but if you need to speak, just unmute yourself, okay? So our test, BiomeFX, does differ in that we are using a technology that hasn't really been used in human health for consumers. The technology that we're using has been more in the background for research advancements, for clinical trials and studies, but now we're able to really bring it to the forefront. So you testing your patient's microbiome, looking at their stool tests is really important, because we know now at this point, at this juncture, that the microbiome is linked to virtually every single medical condition. It would be very difficult today to identify a condition that does not have a link back to the health of the microbiome. And so us as an innovative biotech company, we want to stay on top of that and make sure that we're always on the forefront of delivering you the most accurate, most cutting edge information that we can get to you. It's interesting when we look at what practitioners are using versus what's being discussed and talked about behind the scenes at more like tech conferences and medicine. And right now the trend is very much, we're only going to use whole genome sequencing, which is what I will discuss with you today. So stool testing, obviously it's a piece to a very complex puzzle, but it's really going to help create those bridges, whether it's between autoimmunity, hormone imbalances, metabolic disturbances, neurological conditions, so on and so forth. It's going to drive the way in which you create a very customized and personalized plan for your patients. Now, bear with me here. This is going to be the boring part, but it's important, and I promise you that. Right, when we think about a bacteria, the DNA for a bacteria is not like human DNA. It's a circle, right? It's a circular organism. Right, so when we cut this open and we lay it out flat, right? So we're looking at this flattened piece of bacterial DNA, right? Now, on each part of this, on these DNA sequences, we have little sections, all right? So we have 16S is a section of DNA on the bacterial DNA. We have 23S, which is another section. We have other sections as well, but we don't need to necessarily get into it. Let me see here. Welcome. Mute. Okay. Now, when we think about what's currently being used in the market, the most common type of technology used today in stool testing is called 16S RNA sequencing. All right. Meaning these tests are only looking at this section of a bacterial gene. Now, if we spread this genome out from end to end, there are 9 variable regions, and these are kind of like barcodes or social security numbers or an identifying number to that bacteria. This is how laboratories are identifying these bacteria. They vary, but there is a lot of overlap. And sometimes it's just the smallest changes in these little variable regions that dictate if a species of E. coli is benign or helpful or pathogenic. It's the very tiny changes in these codes in these regions that dictate what these bacteria do in our body. So there can be some issues with this because these areas are variable. If we're only looking at 16S portions, meaning a couple of tiny little variable regions, this can lead to some issues in the accuracy of the information that we're using. It's a very common methodology, mainly because it's very inexpensive. Oftentimes to run 16S RNA sequence tests, I mean, it's nothing fancy. The box is probably this big. You can probably do it in your home office. Maybe it would cost you $15, $20 to run a specimen. It really is only accurate down to the genus level, but even at that point, it becomes a little bit fuzzy. It's hairy. It's sort of like taking a picture of the moon with a Polaroid camera versus taking a picture of the moon with a high definition NASA camera. You want to have an accurate picture. Now 16S is going to give you that graininess, that Polaroid level of clarity when you're looking at bacteria. And this can cause problems, especially with false positives. Now, we all want to get to the bottom of what is causing problems in our patients, right? Whether it's a pathogen, whether it's overall dysbiosis, lack of species diversity, but we also want to make sure we're treating accurately. A problem that has arose in this industry is the detection, the over-detection of things like H. pylori. Not saying it's not there. It's definitely there in a lot of people, but it's not there in everyone. And so we see clinicians go down this path of aggressively treating for pathogens that might not be there, and it's causing more damage than good. And that's unfortunate, you know, and that's just difficult for us as clinicians to accept sometimes as well. Now, when we think about bacteria or anything in classified in the animal, insect world, we think about taxonomy. So when we go back to high school or just college and schooling, going from very broad, a very big umbrella term, more and more specific as we're honing in and we're getting more and more concrete. So obviously for us, we are Homo sapiens. And if we go all the way down to who you are as an individual, that would be as specific as we can get. Now with bacteria, we kind of start to lose clarity and accuracy in 16S when we get down to the family level and the genus level. Any 16S test that's giving you species and strain level, I would be very doubtful on how accurate the results are. It's just not, it was never made to do that. It was made to detect phyla, class, and that's fine. That's all right, but it's not going to keep with being accurate the more specific you get. It just was never built that way. It became popular because it was inexpensive and easy to sell to people. And 5 years ago, 6 years ago, that's the best we had. I used it all the time. We all did. That was changing the way we were practicing medicine for our patients. But, you know, 6 years later, we were able to advance, and that's great. Whole genome sequencing takes the guesswork out of the equation. So we're looking from end to end, reading the entire barcode, looking at every single variable region so that we can identify with almost 100% accuracy, what is it and how much of it is there in this specimen. 16S sequencing really isn't able to identify viruses, protists. So I don't know if some of these companies are using other technology that we're not aware of, but 16S isn't able to pick those up. So whole genome sequencing gives you the ability to identify more variety of organisms in the gut with higher accuracy, okay? So those are kind of the two biggest differences there. I'm not gonna keep on this slide deck because I wanna get into your patient's results in the interest of time because it'll take a while. But those are some of the things that we're seeing. Now, I was at a conference in Geneva, Switzerland just 3 weeks ago, and at our booth, and this was more of an industry conference where people were interested in technology, advancements, innovations. And when they came up to the booth and they saw BiomeFX, they said, is it 16S or is it whole genome sequencing? Because I don't want to deal with 16S anymore, I'm done. And these are not clinicians, these are company owners and very big names in the industry. So you're going to see every company move in this direction. Give it 2 or 3 years, I promise, as it becomes just more accessible to the general population. So, you know, again, we developed this test a couple of years ago. We keep coming up with updates, adding more markers, adding things that help you in your practice. We definitely listen to what our clinicians want and need. And some of it is just in development. It takes a little bit of time, but we're always pivoting editing. It's nonstop. So with this patient report, I hope, is there any way, Mariana, can you tell me a little bit about this gentleman and how he presented to you and any symptoms that he showed up?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
well,
do a couple notes.
yes, thank you. Well, this is a child, 3 years old.
Oh,
He's small in stature for his height. He hasn't grown very good. His belly is like looks bloated. He has trouble sleeping at night, so it gets so doesn't sleep corrido, so the whole night, but gets awake at night, and well, sometimes gets irritable. Yeah, sometimes yeah, irritable. You know, like mad, like it's a strong character, you could say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Was he ever on antibiotics, or did he ever have foodborne illness that you're aware of?
Yes, no antibiotics once, but when he was like 6 months old, and foodborne illness, like a 1-year-old that he vomited like 8 times. Yes, those two, and yes, and he has anti-gliadin positive. Yeah, like sensitive to gluten.
Okay. In the stool or in the blood?
And in the stool.
Okay. And then was he born vaginally or C-section?
41 weeks, born vaginally, breastfed until 1-year-old.
Wow. Okay. I would not have guessed this is a child's test.
Why?
I'll show you why.
Okay. And yes, and as I commented to you at the beginning, he did the GI map test at the same time. So yeah.
I'd be interested to see the similarities and the differences. There's always gonna be some variation in tests, no matter what. Even if you ran your like a CBC, a regular general test, if you ran 2 specimens at the same time, there'll always be a little bit of a change. It's just the way it is. But they should, we'll look and see what is similar, what is different. That could be fascinating. All right, so I'll go through some of the bigger parts of the test, and then I'm not going to go over everything because again, it's a long report. But if you've got questions and I don't address it, just stop me and I'll go back to that. Okay. So this first page, we're going to start at a very broad level, and we keep getting more specific as we go on. So the first part of the test, we really are looking at the bacteria, who's there, what is the balance between these major groups of bacteria, and what is our overall kind of impression of the gut. And then we'll get into more specifics with functions, with species, with that type of thing. So we go from broad and then we start to hone in and get more specific. So we give an overall score at the beginning of the test. He has 25 out of 40. And to get to 40, you'd have to get a 10 out of 10 on the 4 indexes that are on the report. We have alpha diversity, beta, a resistome, and then the pathogens in a few pages. Now, nobody ever gets to 40, so it's okay. But we can definitely get people over 30, and that is something that we sort of strive to as a goal. Now, and if we just, bring all of these indices up slightly, that makes a big impact. But this isn't specific. This is not going to tell us where the problems are. So that's where we have to become investigators and dig more. All right. So alpha diversity is only asking one question: how many bacterial species live in the gut? So, right, we know that the more species, the healthier the gut. The more species equals more resiliency, usually more short chain fatty acids, just a stronger gut. If you have a lot of species there, usually pathogens can't grow. It keeps a balance, like a very diverse ecosystem, like a rainforest. The less species, it's going to look dead, like a desert, and more resilient bacteria are able to grow. Streptococcus, E. coli, bacteria that are more antibiotic resistant will stick around and take over. He's at 7.7, and this is not bad. So when we look at the healthy population that's in our cohort, most people are going to land here. This is going to be where 97% of people will land in this box area. And then the people that are doing exceptionally well, 1.3% will be up here and the other 1.3% down here. So he's not doing poorly. So you said he was not on antibiotics. This would show that he was not on antibiotics, because oftentimes it will be way down 0 to 2 or 3 for somebody recently there. For other patients, especially adults that you're treating, if the number is really low, you ask about if they're eating organic, because pesticides destroy bacteria, or stress, genetics. There's a lot of factors that can influence alpha diversity. Now, alpha is just looking at the number of species, and then beta diversity is looking at the quality of species. So it's kind of an early sign of dysbiosis. Now, his number being at 8.3 is pretty good. It's fine. I'm not too worried about it. When we pay attention to this green dot, our goal is to have it land in the thick cluster of dots. Essentially, it's going to say that the bacteria in your gut are similar to the bacteria in a healthy gut. Okay, so good species richness. The further away this pulls, the lower the score will go, and the more sign there is of some type of dysbiosis. Okay, but again, it's not telling us where it's stemming from. It's just telling us that it's there. The resistome looks at a lot of antibiotic resistance, resiliency within the gut, and then other factors. So this one is more difficult to improve and increase. We often see it pretty low. Oftentimes for patients, I'll tell them to think about their house. What cleaning products are you using? What foods are you buying? Really just improving the world around you, because all of that will influence the resiliency, the stability of the gut. It's more of a general factor, okay? So we go from these indices to bacterial groups. Now this part is where we're working with we're working with some medical writers in order to make a big guide, a glossary, because everyone wants to understand these different groups, because most people aren't familiar with them. So that can be hard, but it can also be an opportunity to really improve and understand the microbiome. And you'll find it quite empowering for yourself to understand much further than calprotectin and secretory IgA. Those are a result of imbalances in bacterial groups. Let's understand the bacteria. Really, that's our goal. So I'll show you here where his gut looks a little different from what a 3-year-old would look like, okay? Now, in a general adult, so if we're thinking about adults, this is what we usually see. Most of the gut is occupied by this large group, Bacteroidetes, okay? Generally speaking, it's not perfect for everyone. Everyone's different, but generally speaking, most of the gut is Bacteroidetes, followed by Firmicutes, a little bit of Proteobacteria, which is the more inflammatory group right here, and then Actinobacteria, which is where your bifidobacterial strains live, right? So that's one that we want to see at a good, healthy level. And then everything else, this black sliver is everything else. So in your gut, usually you just have 4 phyla, then you have everything else, but everybody's got this core microbiome. Now we see in his gut, he's doing great. Look at this Bacteroidetes, looks wonderful. Firmicutes, he's almost textbook perfect. Now he does have a little bit of an overgrowth of the Proteobacteria, which is more inflammatory. It's not super high. I've seen much worse, but it is a little high. And then a little less Actinobacteria. Now, children that are born vaginally, children that are breastfed and not on antibiotics, we typically see Actinobacteria, 13, 15% of the microbiome. Most children are born with a lot of Actinobacteria and bifidobacterial strains. And as they age, it begins to shrink. But at a 3-year-old, I would anticipate it to be much higher still. So that's where if I see really high levels of this phyla, I often wonder, is it a child? Because I can't tell on my end. And so that's usually a telltale sign. So I'm surprised given that, but that's okay. I think right now our focal point from this moment is going to be to focus on inflammation. So we'll talk about that throughout, and a few other things. So when we look to the right, we see these scales, and that's just comparing your level to the general population. So it gives some help. Now we talked about these these three in this one, right? These are the four that we mainly see. But when we see elevations in some of these phyla down here, they can cause problems. Having a 0 is a good thing, actually. So let me walk you through a couple. I won't go through all of them though. Euarchaeota, this is where your methane producers live. So your constipated patients, your patients with methane dominant SIBO, bloating, gas, indigestion. This is your first hint and clue that methane producers are there. Synergistides, this is one that we don't see high in children especially. This is often related to dental caries, oral dysbiosis, and some issues with dental hygiene. Sometimes in adults, it's linked to gingivitis, probably not in a 3-year-old, but perhaps looking deeper into oral healthcare, and then also stomach acid. Bacteria from your mouth shouldn't be getting through your stomach into your colon, right? That's a 20-foot path getting all the way to your large intestine. I'm sorry, I don't know meters, so 3 meters, 3.5. Us Americans, we're behind the times when it comes to measurements. So thinking about, another hint as a clinician, how is the stomach acid, right? Do we need to support that area? Ascomycota is where we see yeasts, funguses, molds, candida, black mold, and issues there. So we're not seeing it actually pop up. So you did see that on the GI map. I'm not seeing evidence of it here. We need to ask ourselves, what makes sense for this patient. But when we look only at Candida, we're missing 66,000 other species. So it gives us a first hint and look, especially for molds. Mold is difficult to detect. So it can give us a sense of digging deeper into the environment, into the body, and so on and so forth. And then this one that popped up for him, the eukaryote, right? Eukaryotes can also be protozoa. So single-celled parasites, maybe not as severe as some others, but he is showing some evidence of protozoa or eukaryotes that are growing in the gut, which could be causing some problems, right? Now, if we add up everything in this column here, we're going to get 100%. So this is the breakdown from phylum. Remember, we're still high up of what is living in his gut. So we see that the Synergistides, the one that comes from the oral microbiome, is very low, 0.06%. It's just a little drop, right? And even less with the eukaryotes, the protozoa family, right? Or phylum, just a teeny tiny amount, but it can cause problems. It shouldn't be there. 0 is normal for most individuals. So we wanna talk about that as we walk on. All right. Any questions on that page?
So 0 in the other after actinobacteria, everything must be on 0, everything. That's the ideal.
It's more normal, yes. So what we did on the last version of the report is we separated this, we made a gap, and we changed the way we were showing the data because it could be confusing for people. Because you may think that you want to be here, right? You may think you want it in the green. That's not the case. We don't need to have the antigen. Yeah. So we shifted that. This one, I'm guessing it's a few months old.
But the first 4, they do need to be in green, right?
We want balance. Yes, that's the goal, is to get them, somewhere within this yellow-green range. So we're seeing that this is a higher proteobacteria with a lower, actinobacteria, not bad. But the balance is becoming shifted. So we're doing well in the first 2, right?
And the fourth one, the vernuculio, it needs to be on red, no?
We want this one higher as well. This is where the very healthy beneficial bacteria, Akkermansia muciniphila lives.
So the first 5 in green and the next ones in red.
Yeah, we want them to be low. Yes.
And when
Okay.
you said that it says here 80%, and then we go to the other
Yeah.
table, you said it's very little. So I don't understand why you said it's 80%, and then on the other side you say very, very little. So can you explain a little bit more?
Yes. Good question. All right, so we're looking at 3 things on this report. Okay, so this is the best way to look at it. I know the graphs are pretty because they're color, but this is the easiest way. So the healthy population, first we're looking at what's normal, what's our range, right? Our healthy reference range here, okay? Now you're showing how do you score? You have 65% of bacteroidetes. That puts you right almost in the middle, right? You're at the 40th percentile, okay? Now, when we come down here, we see that for synergicities, the reference range is low. It's from 0.01 to 0.05. So we're creeping outside of what's considered healthy. That puts this individual at the 79th percentile, all right? So up here, these graphs are showing you how do you compare to the percentile, not what is, if you added all of these up, you'd be much higher than 100, right? So this is, again, how do you compare to the reference range, not what is, these are the absolute values that would equal 100. Does that make sense? So we're looking at 3
Yes.
things. Okay, yeah, I get that question a lot, and we need to somehow lay that out a little bit easier.
Okay, I understood.
So a good sample percentile in the bottom would be like 40, not below 50, or for example, the first is 40%, but then the synergist is 78%, which is not good. So like not be above 50% the percentile, my sample percentile.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you would want it to fall within this reference range, but ideally,
Okay.
you know, being lower is better in these situations. So just kind of understanding, the takeaway here is understanding what are these organisms? Why do I need to care about them? And then what kind of questions are we going to ask our patient, right? So again, thinking about stomach acid, thinking about oral health care, thinking about where do you get exposed to protozoa or other eukaryotes. It could be from contaminated water, meats, fruits and vegetables that maybe aren't washed. Those are common places. Could also just be from playing outside as a child, you know, it's normal. So it happens. We'll want to work on fixing it, but we'll talk about some ideas on protocols and what we can do, taking into consideration it's a child, not wanting to damage the microbiome more as well. All right. So we go from the phylum to family. So thinking again about taxonomy, we're getting more specific now. People use this page in different ways. I don't use these graphs very much, but some of the consultants on our team really enjoy using them. So we do have a team of 9 doctors that review results with patients. Everyone's different. Some are really good with herbal medicine. Some are great with naturopathic medicine. Some are medical doctors. So we've got a variety. Most people find who they like and who they align with, and they stick with them. But we get great feedback on the consultations. So I don't particularly use these, but some of the consultants do. What I do down here, you're never going to have a perfect line of green dots. It just doesn't happen. I've not seen one yet, but it's important to start understanding which groups are inflammatory, right? Especially because we saw proteobacteria was a little bit high. We can get ahead of that. Let's not let that get worse. So where is it coming from? When I look on here, I see that, let's see, I'll just pull out a few. We're not going to go through all of them. It would take too long. But the Clostridiales, pretty high. This can be an ammonia producer. Sotorella ACA, this is an inflammatory group of bacteria. Other Clostridia, a little bit high. Enterobacter, which is pretty inflammatory, also high. So these are some of the ones that we really want to work on pulling back. And we can do that at the same time as helping to just improve the alpha diversity piece a little bit. even though he was at 7.7, he had a pretty decent number of bacteria. If we can improve diversification, improve healthier groups of bacteria living there, naturally those pathogenic or inflammatory groups will fall back. They can't live in the same environment. Your healthy commensal species and your pathogenic species like different environments. So if we can support the growth of the healthy, the unhealthy groups will naturally fall down. All right.
Let me ask you, when you said before that the HCl, the hydrochloric acid, relates to bacteria, is that they secrete, that they have secrete, or because they are low, or how you know that you're not secreting the stomach acid? I didn't understand very well. And how do you relate with these ones that are here?
Yeah, so with the stomach acid piece, no, we don't have a test to look for hydrochloric acid production. That would, certain people will do different tests with drinking, what is it called, like baking soda. They'll do different tests thinking about stomach acid secretion, thinking about maldigestion of things like proteins, or looking at some of the digestive markers. Now we can look at some elements of digestive efficiency, but for most of us in functional medicine, we're making an educated guess here as to what's going on. For a child, it may be worth doing like apple cider vinegar gummies, or even digestive bitters, maybe, but it's hard to get children to take things if they don't taste good. So, I get that. I have a son, he's 8, and he's used to being an experimental guinea pig, but not all children are. But yeah, so just knowing where bacteria live. So knowing that this group here, the Synergistides, is often linked to the oral microbiome, that's where understanding little bits about these groups pays off for you, because you'll understand then what to start looking for, right?
Okay.
Now, I work with a dentist. I do all of his consultations. Every single one comes back with this level high, because he's working on patients that have just dental issues in general. And we see it very consistently linking back to especially the bacteria that cause gingivitis. This specimen doesn't have that group. Okay. But don't get hung up on this page. I'd say starting off, spend very little time here, because it'll make you feel a little defeated. I think moving on and looking at other functionalities will be more useful. So this group of bacteria here on page 4, these change with every specimen you run. Now, your microbiome is going to be different than mine, always. There are no 2 microbiomes that are the same. So this page will change depending on the specimen. Sometimes you'll have 4 groups, sometimes you'll have 1, sometimes you'll have none if there are a lot of problems. So with these bacteria that pop up on this page are typically more inflammatory, generally speaking. A lot of times the bacteria that show up on this page are, maybe they're not pathogens, but they're opportunistic, or they're pathobionts. So they're not commensal friendly species most of the time. Agarotherella, ACA, I can tell you a little bit about this group. Agarotherella plays a role in liver health, metabolic health, triglyceride levels. In an adult, that's going.
Me fui, Kelly.
Qué vaina. Sorry, go ahead.
Ay, Dios mío.
No, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Here, and give me 1 second. Oh well. Okay. So just thinking about some again of the qualities of the bacteria. It may feel slightly intimidating, but it's really quick to pick up. And then the rest of the report from there really just starts to think about overall balance in the functions of the bacteria, right? This page, looking at the dysbiosis ratios, really just looking at how well are these big groups balanced. And he's doing fine. We don't have to worry too much about this page. He's got a great balance between Bacteroidetes and Firmicutes. We saw that already, nice and low and healthy. In adults, we think about this if the number's high, autoimmunity, immune dysregulation in general, obesity and weight gain also. Proteobacteria to actinobacteria. We do see that this level is becoming slightly unbalanced, meaning proteobacteria is beginning to grow, right? We want to see a good balance here, but we see that this shift in this bar is increasing. You know, we want to prevent, right? We're preventing it from going further. So we're going to work on that. That's going to be a really pretty easy thing to accomplish right now with him, I think. Prevotella to Bacteroides. We see that this level is just slightly high. So Prevotella, generally speaking, is a healthy bacteria. It typically likes to eat healthier foods like the fibers and plant-based foods. That's what Prevotella likes to eat, whereas Bacteroides likes to consume sugar and saturated fat. So we usually see it high because most adults prefer to eat sugar and saturated fat. Now, here's the interesting thing about Prevotella though. It's not all good. Not all of Prevotella is good. So is there a family history of any autoimmunity at all?
Yeah, well, Alzheimer's, she high blood sugar.
Okay.
In the family, Alzheimer's, high blood sugar.
Okay.
Yes, those two, but
Cancer.
Okay.
cancer.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are certain groups of Prevotella, I'll write one of them in the chat, that can have a dark side. We're going to add it to the report. And that can be linked to things like autoimmunity, especially. If this ratio is really high, maybe at 5 or 10 or 20, I usually find that there's a correlation with inflammatory bowel disease, Hashimoto's, Crohn's, things like that. So that's one to sort of keep an eye on. All right, so we look at 24 different pathogens. No, we just increased it. Now we look at 34 different pathogens.
Doctor, one question before entering into pathogens.
Sure.
All this you have been saying like US healthy compared to US healthy, but in a way, like I believe like nobody's like really completely healthy, no? Or like,
Yep.
How do you address that healthy or really what we want to get to, or I don't know.
Yeah,
Your findings in that.
You may define health way different than we do, right? That's very subjective. So our database that we use, we have the world's largest database of bacteria and people samples, right, in the whole world. Now, how did we define healthy? It was based on the Human Microbiome Project and the American Gut Project. So those were the two research studies that really made the human microbiome what it is today, right? That was following groups of people. Now, they defined healthy as the absence of disease, of being normal weight, of filling out just different questionnaires. But you could argue that I'm sure some of those people in that group were not as healthy as you'd want them to be. Now, one thing that we're doing, and we find this with some of our international companies that we work with, they don't want to be compared to the United States. I get it. So we are working on different databases for different parts of the world, right? Japan is going to have a much different microbiome. So will Europe, so will South America, compared to the United States. That just takes time. We're getting there. We're trying to segment so that if you live in a different country, the results reflect the people around you. I don't know of any other company doing that, right? So it's not like we're behind on that. It'll just take time to build those data sets.
But you wouldn't build like an ideal person, for example, regarding of where they are. So like this person should have this and this and this, and taking all the world in a way.
You're in terms of thinking about age, race, sex, gender, all those things will play a role. That's just a really big undertaking, right? We know, for example, as you get older, this naturally goes up. Your FB ratio gets higher and higher. So for somebody that's 95 years old, maybe this ratio in this range doesn't make sense. But you're going to find that problem with every lab that you're working with, right?
Oh, no, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer.
Yeah,
I got
absolutely.
the idea.
It's exciting to think about, you know, where we're going to take it. It's just going to, you know, it takes a lot of effort. But we have a whole team of bioinformatics scientists on this. I don't understand any of that, but they're working on it. All right, so our pathogen control, again, we're looking at 34 different pathogens that are common, and you know, evaluating how does it look in the whole picture. I wouldn't worry about these too much. You know, we've got a little bit of E. coli. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's very pathogenic or causing problems. I would, you know, for this individual, I would probably start with some Saccharomyces boulardii, maybe some IgG 2000 or serum derived bovine immunoglobulins that can help to rebalance. The pathogens aren't so high that we need to use antimicrobials. We don't need to use antibiotics. Even for that small amount of protozoa, I think that we can work a little more gently to prevent more problems. So E. coli has a good affinity for, Saccharomyces does a good job of helping to rebalance too much E. coli. Now, this one down here, most people are not familiar with. It's called Bilophila wadsworthia. Bilophila loves to eat bile. So thinking again about higher up in the gastrointestinal tract, you know, with the stomach, with the liver and bile production, you know, what are we able to extrapolate from that? Now, for Bilophila, it can create hydrogen sulfide. It's a hydrogen sulfide producer, which could create more gas, bloating, and loose stools. It's more inflammatory. It can also create secondary bile acids, which are inflammatory as well. So finding ways to help lower it is important. He's, you know, not too high. It's on the edge of this reference range, but we still want to get ahead of it. So the IgG can help there too, which is, I like to use just a couple of products, not for a 3-year-old. How many products feasibly can you use? 2, 3, you're not going to get too much. All right, so now we're looking into functionality, and this is usually a good place to start. So we're looking at things like short chain fatty acid production, inflammatory byproducts and compounds, things that are going to you know, really play a role in symptoms that your patients are experiencing. So first we look at sacrolytic fermentation, and this is really just asking the question, how well are you making short chain fatty acids? How well are you making lactate? Now, you make most short chain fatty acids from fiber, right? Not from protein, not from fat. You make very little from protein and fat, but you make the most from oligosaccharides, resistant starches, and fibers. So we're seeing that this is an opportunity for him. His overall sacrolytic fermentation is low, right? So this is where I think that we can begin shifting some of the inflammatory groups to get them out of there. If we just start specifically feeding our commensal species, our keystone species, we're able to rebalance the microbiome. When we look at the short chain fatty acids, the more important ones, he's got a little bit of butyrate, right? It's on the low end. We want to get him higher. Propionate, doing okay, but I think we can get him a little bit higher. And then acetate. So there's a few things that we need to take note of here. Short chain fatty acids are acidic, right? The pH of your intestinal tract is very important. So we want the intestinal tract to be slightly more acidic. That's what your commensal species, your healthier groups like. So we need to work on this because, again, if you create an acidic environment, your pathogens just can't live there. They don't want to be there, they can't. They like it to be more alkaline, a higher pH. So butyrate, okay, acetate is one way to create butyrate. Your bacteria that make acetate, will eat acetate, they'll consume it to make butyrate. So these are going to work hand in hand. One thing you could try is using kombucha, because that's a high level of acetate to feed the gut. You can use fermented foods. like different just ferments that you can do in the kitchen, sauerkraut, pickles.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Depending on how receptive he is. But then also using oligosaccharides. So this is where supplements become really helpful because you can use concentrated prebiotic fibers that feed these bacteria the best. And that's just the simplest way, honestly.
Like mega prebiotic.
Mega pre, yeah. And for him, I would use, just take the capsules and open them up, mix them in food like yogurt, smoothies, make it easy. You can make Jello, mix it with gelatin and make your own Jello or a popsicle. You can do that. There's a lot of ways to get creative with a child. But our research here is excellent. We see a huge increase in butyrate production. Actually, all 3 of the main short chain fatty acids. So I find it to be extremely effective. It's hard to get enough fiber. You know, how many of us do? Gosh, it's difficult. So using some supplements is very helpful there. Okay. His lactate production looks good. Now lactate is also going to help with keeping the intestinal lumen a little more acidic. So that's good. And then we get into protein fermentation. So if you're not digesting well, this is another sign of stomach acid quality and production. Now, this is actually looks really good. It may not, it's showing up red here, but lower is typically better. Protein fermentation leads to a lot of inflammatory byproducts. So we don't want to keep fueling that. Now, pause for a minute because there are some problems, but so we're seeing the proteolytic fermentation is a little lower. Polyamine production is lower, that's fine. But here's an issue here, and one that may be relevant to him, right? So phenols, phenolic compounds like P-cresol is toxic to the intestinal lining. So when we think about leaky gut, when we think about intestinal permeability, he's getting pretty high. He's at the 70th percentile, and that's pretty elevated. So I would really do what you can to support the intestinal lining, whether it's from bone broth, homemade applesauce and pectins. Using, again, IgG can be really helpful for multiple things. The serum-derived bovine immunoglobulins can help protect the intestinal mucosal lining. Omega-3s, EPA especially, can help there too. For a diet, I would reduce high tyrosine foods because tyrosine becomes this toxic byproduct. Now, this can link to issues with mood and health and brain health. So phenolic compounds can play a role in behavior. So you mentioned, I'm not saying it's the perfect, link, but it can play a role there. Also, if he's got any sort of eczema or atopic dermatitis, this is where the phenolic compounds can play a role there too. That's where we see the biggest link.
And glutamine in this case, the glutamine, yes, is used in this case where the phenols are high or no?
So glutamine is going to play more of a role in ammonia production. So perfect question as we go in there. Ammonia, you don't want to use it in everyone because glutamine, you don't want to use glutamine in everybody because glutamine can feed your ammonia producing bacteria. Remember, we want short chain fatty acids. Ammonia is alkaline. They're on different ends of a pH scale. So we don't want to feed our ammonia producing bacteria. These are usually our pathogens. And ammonia is going to be very harmful to our liver, kidneys, and our brain. But this is okay. Being at the lower end is fine. We're all right with that because ammonia is not healthy for the gut or for the body in high amounts. So you could use some glutamine in this situation, yes. But I see high glutamine I see high ammonia all the time, very often. Okay.
His case is in the 10%, no? He's in the green, no? The green dot, no?
The green dot. So being lower
That's
is better.
good.
We want to be lower in this situation. So
he's the black dot. See, he's under the green dot. Okay. Okay, perfect.
He's this green dot right here, this bright green.
Okay.
Okay. So you could use glutamine in this situation, it'd be fine. Low hydrogen sulfide production, that's fine as well. Hydrogen sulfide is very inflammatory. Now we saw that Bilophila wadsworthia show up in the pathogens, but it wasn't so much that it was causing high hydrogen sulfide production. So that's a good thing too. No methane production, but we didn't see methane producers show up. That's okay. We don't need methane in our gut. All right. But when we do see that high, it's just a different story. Now, GABA production, neurotransmitters obviously are produced in the gut and influence production in the body. So GABA production will play a role in just stress response, calming response. You mentioned that he's not sleeping well. Now, I don't know. I mean, if he's falling asleep okay, but waking up, that might be something different. Now, I mean, his GABA production looks really good. Let me see here.
Or maybe the parasites, the possible parasites.
Possible, yeah. I mean, that can certainly play a role. I would try something gentle, like a
Theanine, melatonin. No, melatonin, no, but theanine, magnesium.
yeah, magnesium, or you could even try some valerian root, but I don't know if that would be very effective for him. I try not to give too much to children, but
yeah.
Glutathione, glutathione in the gut stimulates glutathione in the liver. So when we think about glutathione supplementation, a lot of it is dictated by the gut. So he's a little bit low. So you could use N-acetylcysteine with some magnesium. You could use glutathione if you'd like. It doesn't taste good, so but I would say that he would be a candidate for supplementation. Okay. Indoles play a role in mood as well. Indoles are mainly really healthy. They help keep your intestinal barrier, the tight junctions, really tight and linked together. And it plays a role in things like the motility of the gut. It stems from tryptophan, so it's kind of in this same world as creating serotonin. It's in the same pathways as serotonin production, melatonin production. They're all linked together. He's doing really well. I mean, he's just at this kind of cusp here. When indoles get really high, especially off the chart high, it can create unwanted mood changes. So mood swings and anger and a lot of bipolar sort of feelings. I've seen it happen in a few cases, not a lot. It's not that common, but we do see it. He's at a healthy level. I wouldn't worry about it. If anything, this is very protective to him. All right. Because what can happen is indoles can bind serotonin receptors. So if it gets really high, we're going to see really weird changes in mood and problems there. It's rare though. It is pretty rare. Okay. Estrogen recycling, he's a child, it's all right. But for patients with PCOS, it can be a problem. Vitamin biosynthesis, we create a lot of vitamins in our gut to feed our gut. It's not necessarily micronutrient levels in your blood. We're looking at how bacteria feed each other because they need vitamins just like we do. Now we do see links though between vitamins in the gut and vitamins in the body. So I usually look at them as a whole and then kind of decide what to do. So his thiamin's kind of low. Riboflavin looks good. Pantothenic acid is healthy. B6, good. Thinking about neurotransmitter health, thinking about brain health. Biotin looks okay. Folate and B12 are lower. Now, these are two that I supplement a lot with. 37% of the folate that's in your body can come from your gut, right? So that's a lot. And then 31% of your B12 can come from your gut, right? So with both of these low and they're at the same level actually, I would supplement with either drops or whatever you want, but work to make sure you're covering that.
And that could have a relationship with his low growing. His percentage is like 10%. So
I have a question. You said that these vitamins were not like the whole body levels, but only the gut.
Yes,
Okay.
so it's two things. Most of these are there to feed each other, right? With like the ATP and the Krebs cycle that we learn about, right? All of these vitamins are going to play a role in feeding other bacteria. Now, say you're starving, you have no food. Well, if you die, the bacteria die, right? They don't want to die. So what they can do is they'll shift feeding each other, and they'll feed you. They will give you the vitamins so that you stay alive. Yes, it's pretty
share
cool.
with you.
Yeah, so the same thing with folate and B12, we see it happen more than some of the other ones. I don't have my notes in front of me, but I think we get maybe 10% of pantothenic acid can get absorbed. It's not that much though. Mainly it's these three. It's folate, B12, and then vitamin K2. Most of those come from the gut. So we get that shared effect. But yeah, it would not replace a micronutrient panel overall, but when I see these low, I usually recommend supplementation.
Thank you.
Sure. And I like to use, I mean, personally, I love hydroxy and adenosine B12. I don't use as much methylated as most people. But, maybe worth checking him for MTHFR defects, right? Knowing that you mentioned the sleep, you mentioned the mood, those could all play a role in the methylation cycle. Taking a look there too, making sure you're supplementing correctly can play a role in all of the development. And then K2 looks great, looks wonderful, perfect. We love to see healthy K2 levels for bone health, especially for calcium. Depositing calcium into the bones, it's a growing child, that becomes really important. All right, last page, very last page for you guys. I know I'm over time. So the keystone species are the healthiest bacteria. It's better than commensal species. These are the most healthy bacteria in your gut. They only take up a tiny amount of the gut, 10% maybe, but we need to see healthy levels of them there. Now, there are more keystone species than this, but these are the main ones that we look at. And if we can feed these with things like oligosaccharides, get them growing, we're going to see better short chain fatty acid production. I mean, he had butyrate, propionate, and acetate. We just want it to be higher, right? We just want to see higher levels. So being able to help this grow would be really beneficial to him. Akkermansia plays a role in the mucosal barrier. We want to see it grow. Akkermansia is responsible for keeping that mucosal barrier healthy. It's hard to get it to grow. It loves to eat dark red polyphenols. So grapes, pomegranate, cherry, all those are foods that Akkermansia likes to eat. It doesn't do well with cold weather, but and intermittent fasting, but I wouldn't recommend intermittent fasting for a child. So
then let me ask you here for a moment. There's have been some companies that recommend us to buy the pendulum company, the Akkermansia, directly, or there is a company in Spain that says that they use, I don't know which species, or to increase 80,000% the Akkermansia, and Zymogen has a probiotic called probiotic lean that I don't remember which species are, but what is the best option? Because patients are calling us because Akkermansia leans, and everybody wants to be thin and lean. So we are with that difficulty. We don't know what to do. Microbiome, the ones that sells probiotics that are in sport, they say that they have studies that they increase with their product 80,000% the Akkermansia. So we really, people start shooting us information and they want us to give them an answer, and they want to recommend them something, and we're not sure if they have enough studies on the products, or that's only business, or what's going on? So can you tell us an answer, and what do we have to tell the patient? And we hear some of our patients are in Latin America. We don't have this kind of, we have grapes, but are imported. We don't have that kind of fruits that you're telling us.
Sure.
And for a children to do starting, how you say, ayuno, intermittent fasting is not possible. So what is the procedure to increase the akkermansia?
Good, great question. First, you have smart patients that they're asking you this.
Yeah.
Okay, not everything, it's not always good. You want to know first, what is your level? That's important. Too much akkermansia can be a bad thing. Think about it. What is its job? Akkermansia, muciniphila. Muciniphila means mucus loving. So what does it do? It eats your mucus, right? In your gut. It eats the top layer of mucus, and then your body creates new mucus. But what if this level was at 7%? Is it too much mucus eating? It's going to cause problems if you're eating and eroding your mucus layer all the time. So there are very few studies, there are only a couple. There are only a couple of studies that link high akkermansia to some pretty serious medical conditions like multiple sclerosis. Now, high levels, very high levels. So first of all, you don't want to just start taking a bunch of something without knowing what to do. I think it's what Pendulum is doing and what other companies are doing. It's very interesting, but we want to be responsible, right? In what we're doing. So being a little bit cautious, it's a very expensive product and it's only going to do one thing. So that's kind of hard. I like to choose things that can do multiple because it's going to be difficult to address everything. Now, if they want to take Pendulum and they have low akkermansia, you can try it, but I think it's $115 a month or something. It's kind of a lot in my opinion. It would be interesting to see if it works. I think they've got some cool research. With, oligosaccharides will feed akkermansia though. I mean, and that is an option. If you give them the right food, then you're also going to feed a lot of these bacteria too. So you may see a bigger effect by using polyphenols. I like to use foods as much as I can. It's just how I roll. But if you want to use polyphenol powders in supplement form or oligosaccharides, that's an option too.
What is the other word you say? Polysaccharides.
Polyphenols. Let me write it down here.
Polyphenols and polysaccharides.
Polysaccharides.
Oligosaccharides. Okay, sorry.
That's okay. I'm typing it in.
Okay, but to use the other, for example, the other brands that they say the species that is called probiotic lean, the name is LEAN, or there's a company in Spain that says that have enough studies that these species work and increase the akkermansia. Do you think there's enough research on that? Have you heard something?
I mean, it is interesting. It is. And it's something that our company is interested in learning about because it's fascinating if they're able to do that. Now, there is some research. The conference I told you about where they're asking about BiomeFX and whole genome sequencing, there were 2 companies there with their akkermansia products. And I walked around the exhibit hall with our director of innovation. He's in Denmark and he was interested in it. So there is something there. But again, let's use this example right here, right? We've got some things going on. We've got low short chain fatty acids. We've got just a couple of pathogens that aren't high. Do I really want to have, if I'm only going to get them to take 3 things, am I going to make it one of those products just akkermansia? I don't think that's addressing a bigger problem here. With your patients, sure, if they're adults and they want to take it, I don't think it's going to make them lose 10 pounds. I don't think it's going to make them lose weight. I think that's a more complicated situation, but if it can help butyrate production, that's awesome. So we'll see. I need to dig more into it. I'm interested to learn more. But our studies on prebiotics show that prebiotic fibers increase Akkermansia. So that's an easy route as well from oligosaccharides. It does the same. And we're using research from the companies we work with for that. So it's solid. But yeah, good question. Everybody, this is the hot topic in functional medicine right now, right? Akkermansia, muciniphila, everyone wants it. But don't get too much. It's not always a good thing. We just don't know enough yet. Okay, looking at the time, I just want to quickly go through here. Faecalibacterium is going to convert acetate to butyrate, so making sure it stays healthy, really good. Using like something like Restore Flora with Saccharomyces and some spores, you're going to be able to address a few things, right? It's gentle for children, easy to take. I would consider doing oligosaccharides again to help feed these groups that are pretty low. Now he's got, the nice thing about this report is he's got most species detected, but we can get other ones growing for sure by giving the body what it wants. And once we see this page improve, you'll see the alpha diversity go up, you'll see the short chain fatty acids go up, and you'll see the pathogens naturally go down. Hopefully the phenols go down too, because that one was pretty high. And we want to lower that. So, I mean, from my view, my philosophy on working with the microbiome is that we want to give it the ingredients that it needs to heal itself. I don't like to use antimicrobials unless I have to, and I do. I use them in a lot of cases, but I try not to, you know, because it's going to work just a lot like an antibiotic. You are going to hurt your commensal species. They're not that specific. So, you know, in this situation, looking at this, again, food, EPA-rich omegas, maybe you can find a chewy, like a gummy. I think Nordic Naturals has one for children that tastes like orange. That's good for them, and it helps feed the healthier bacteria. You know, finding ways there, and then getting really creative in the kitchen with smoothies and acai bowls. I don't even know, just something fun can help. But right. Any questions on this and this page of the report?
No.
Okay.
We're fine.
Was this helpful at all going through the report itself, pulling it apart?
Amazing.
Okay.
Very, very helpful.
Okay.
It's been,
And you, let me ask you, and you as a practitioner, what I see is every time I look at one of kind of these tests, they always recommend fiber.
True.
But people who still don't have very good digestion or whatever, they ferment a lot. So still, at what time the fiber, that's one question. And the ketogenic diet does not have enough fiber. So what is your mind about that? These two questions. When you start with fiber, if you have a person who is fermenting and is increasing the pathogenic bacteria or whatever,
Absolutely.
or has evil.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you. We talk a lot about fiber, probably because a lot of people don't get enough. We know that, right? Okay, if you're not breaking down fiber well, your first clue is to look here. Ruminococcus bromai and Ruminococcus flavifaciens. Look at what their job is. Their function is to break down cellulose, right? So if we're thinking about all of that fiber, especially from fruits and vegetables, we need it to be broken down from a big chunk to a little chunk, right? We need these big fiber molecules to keep getting broken down to get smaller and smaller. So Ruminococcus, these cellulose degraders, that's their main job. Here, let me pull this back up real quick. I think I've got a picture. Hold on a second. So we need to get the Ruminococcus growing, because otherwise all that fiber is going to hit your gut and you're not going to feel good. You're going to feel really bloated, right? Because I think I've got a picture. Yes. Okay. All right, so starting up here, you've got your Ruminococcus, bromide, and flavifactions. These are called primary degraders, and they love to eat resistant starches, not necessarily the cellulose, right? To get Ruminococcus, to get bifidobacteria to grow, we need resistant starch. Nobody is eating, it's very hard to get a lot of resistant starch in the diet. Green banana flour, potato starch, cold rice, cold beans, those are resistant starches. Now, once they're growing and they're able to then break down more cellulose as well, you can start helping to create acetate, lactate, and that's going to feed a lot of your butyrate producers. So it's this chain of events, which is why fiber is so important. We need your primary degraders to break down the complex fibers to create these intermediate products like acetate and lactate, propionate, right? And then that's going to feed your butyrate producers. So we want butyrate. Everyone wants butyrate, right? That's why everyone wants Akkermansia. They want butyrate, but you have to go through this chain of events to get there. So I'm not saying like, you know, eat 50 grams of fiber a day, but we need to be really specific with it, whether it's making sure we're getting resistant starch, oligosaccharides, and then just a variety of these different types of fibers is going to really help to feed your primary degraders. Okay, so that's number one. If they have issues with FODMAPs, that's different. That's usually a problem in the small intestine. And we need to clean up that problem if it is SIBO. That very well could be the case, but we need to identify where is the problem. So if for this situation, we do see that he had, right, his Ruminococcus were both pretty low, right? Hold on. We have Ruminococcus bromide at 0.26, Ruminococcus flavifactions not detected, right? So you mentioned him being bloated. You know, again, some of the things I recommended fall in line with that. So I didn't go through every little detail of the report, but it, you know, that's something that can really help to get better degradation, better breakdown of the fibers. Okay, now when it comes to keto, right, your other question, when we're thinking about what's happening in the gut, you can ferment carbohydrates from fiber, you can ferment protein, and you can ferment fat. Now, when it comes to short chain fatty acid production, you make way more short chain fatty acids from fiber, then you make some from protein, but the consequence, the problem is that while you will make some short chain fatty acids, you're also going to create amines and polyamines, phenols, sulfides, ammonia, and things that are inflammatory. So you will get some short chain fatty acids, but you're also going to get all of these. So we need that balance. And then with fat, you make very little short chain fatty acids, and you're not feeding the bacteria that need this fuel source. So, you know, I agree with you completely. Now, if fiber is an issue for people, you can do, again, polyphenol powders. We don't have one, but I think Orthomolecular has one. Other brands have them that you can get online. And that will give you polyphenols to feed these bacteria without the fiber.
Can I ask you a question, please? If the keto diet is not that strict, like you eat a lot of vegetables, it's not more like just eggs and avocado or something, you eat a lot of vegetables, but you eat low carb. Yep. The production, because I understand for what you said earlier, can you put the previous, I don't know how to say it, lamina.
A slide.
Slide, I forgot. What I understand is that when you are in a keto diet, you're going to ferment, your bacteria are going to fermentate mainly carbohydrate and I'm sorry, protein, right? Because you're eating very little of carbohydrate, right? Did I understand well?
Yes.
Yes.
So, no, go ahead, Mariana. You can go.
No, that if I understood correct, that from proteins you can also ferment, but you have all these amines, like all these
Exactly,
other products
That's
that
what I mean. That's what I mean. That if you are low, very low in carbohydrate, your bacteria are the protein. The bacteria are going to
it's going to
ferment
be their fuel.
mainly protein, so you're going to have those byproducts that are toxic. But if you eat a ketogenic diet that is not that strict and you eat a lot of vegetables, that issue,
Yeah.
like kind of solved, right? Because you're eating a lot of fiber from your vegetables.
So yes, I mean, with keto, right, a standard keto diet is going to be 80% fat, right? That's the goal most of the time. But you're right, there will be a shift. There will be a shift. Your gut will try to compensate. What are the goals for keto? Weight loss, blood sugar balance, right? We're not really so focused on the microbiome when someone is on a keto diet. Long-term use of the keto diet is going to damage the gut. Now, you're right, if you're using low glycemic, low carb vegetables like lettuces and kale, radicchio, that could help. Celery. I don't know. I'm not so up to date on all of them, but that can help for sure. Using supplements can help. Like prebiotics are keto friendly. You can use that. I mean, you can find, I call it biohacking. You can still do what you're trying to do, right? You can biohack the gut, but you're going to rely on supplements more. So, you just have to figure out what works. I'm a whole food kind of person, so I might not be the right person to ask, but you can use Megaspore with Megapre and do a lot with the gut and keep healing it, keeping it to help it grow and diversify and so on and so forth. So
let me ask you, the only lab that does this is you that do all the sequence. The GI map doesn't do it. The micro 360 does
the
not.
doctors that
Doctors that do you know that's you only? That you were telling us at the beginning that you were going to tell which labs or which don't.
Oh
So
yeah,
you're-
no, we're the only ones that do whole genome at the moment.
okay.
But give it a couple of years and I bet they all will. I'm sorry, that's not true. I don't want to mislead you. Thorne, they have a test, right? Thorne, the supplement company. I'm not a big fan of it, but they use whole genome sequencing. And then there's another company in San Diego, and they use whole genome sequencing, but I'm not very familiar with it. It's called Sun Genomics, but I don't know the price. I don't know what the test looks like.
Okay, and let me ask you, right now, because of coronavirus, everyone is having D3, but because of coagulation problems, some doctors have tell patients don't use the D3 with K2, and you're very fond, and I see that you have the product and you measure the K2, and right now we have some of our nutritionists right now has told us that when you put K2D3, because LDL transport the vitamin D3, it can increase the LDL. So why are you so fond of K2? And at this moment, people are telling don't use the K2 coagulation problem. So I'm giving anticoagulants to all the COVID person. So can you say something? I maybe you don't have the answer, but I'm telling what people tell us, and they start asking us.
Sure.
And you have megaquinone as a product, only K2, I think. So why are you so fond of K2? And
well, vitamin K1 and K2 are very different.
Okay.
So
your product is K2, no?
Yes, vitamin K1 plays the biggest role in the clotting cascade. I'm trying to see if I have an old presentation that's amazing. I don't have it on my computer. I'd have to send it to you. But vitamin K1 plays a role in the clotting cascade. And the main job of vitamin K2 is not to clot. It may have a tiny, very, very, very small effect on clotting, but it shouldn't. That's not its job. The main job of vitamin K2 is to activate the hormone osteocalcin. And it's also supposed to play a role with MGP complex for which plays a role in taking calcium out of your arteries and putting them into your bones. So it's all about the way in which it's shuttling calcium. So it goes, vitamin D3 does activate vitamin K2, and that does play a role in activating these other enzymes and that play a role in shuttling calcium. But osteocalcin plays a role in testosterone production, insulin sensitivity, arterial elasticity, the matrix of the collagen in your skin, and elastin. But the research on vitamin K2 is mainly around those topics. If any of it even goes to clotting, I would be surprised. It's very, very, very small. But when it comes to bone density, and especially in postmenopausal women, if you have somebody on warfarin or Coumadin and they regularly have their INR checked, K2 is not going to influence it. It's vitamin K1. They're totally different molecules. Hold on, I have one I can show you. Let's see. If you have any research showing that vitamin K2 from menaquinone plays a role in clotting, I would love to see it.
No, we don't have it. Maybe
okay,
I am confused, but what patients
Sure.
have recommend D3 with K2 and they don't, no, coagulation, and maybe I don't have enough information about. So you're helping us. Thank you.
Phylloquinones are K1, right? They play a role in the clotting cascade. Menaquinones are K2. They look their chemical structure is totally different. Now, there's different types of menaquinones. There's MK4, and then there's MK7. MK7 lives in your body, has the longest half-life, right? So we want to use natural MK7. We make vitamin K2, we ferment it. We feed bacteria chickpeas, and they create K2. That's how we make our own K2. And it's in this MK7 version. Now, you can't really get vitamin K2 in the diet. Mostly you can get it from natto, which is a fermented soybean paste. It's disgusting. Oh, it's so gross. I tried to eat it once and it's awful. Vitamin K2 has two main roles: activate osteocalcin, the hormone, and play a role in the matrix GLA protein, right? So it's got two main roles. That's it. Doesn't play a role in the clotting cascade, right? So we want to put calcium where it needs to go. And and osteocalcium plays a role in quite a bit. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I don't have any more questions.
So it's possible.
There is a study showing low K2 and worse COVID outcomes. So K2 playing a role in the COVID long haul protocols is something that people are interested in. I'm not too up to date on it. I haven't been paying that much attention, to be honest. But when we, think about, like the situation with Pablo, we don't need to give him any sort of K2. He looks great, right? He doesn't need it. But in some cases, we do, especially if we have low bacterial diversity, then we may need it. Women, I give it to everyone. You're over 35, I'm going to put you on K2.
Okay.
No, if possible, the possible supplements for Pablo that I wrote down were a mega prebiotic, mega spore biotic, probably bitters or for digestion, fermented foods, NAC, omega-3, B12, folic acid, like the convenience that could work for
and
his
polyphenols,
and
right?
Polyphenols.
I mean, it's a lot. That's a lot, right? So
no, but it's okay. No.
Now, I would say even you might want to start with Saccharomyces or Restore Flora instead of Megaspore. Restore Flora is a product we don't use it that much, but because he's got a little bit of the E. coli, even though it's not at a super high level, it can play a role there. It's also very gentle for a child. And Saccharomyces can help to acidify, create more acid in the gut. So helping just
The
support
pH.
gut and the pH. Yep, I would do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Wonderful. Oh.
And a question is why it took a lot to have the results, and patients get impatient. So there's still, I remember that we wait for the result on this test like more than 2 months, I think. I don't know. And you know, is still the same amount of time to tell the patients, and they know that it will take for a while or something like that?
I would want to see the tracking. Did it take a long time to get to the lab? But our turnaround time right now is 10 days, 10 business days.
It's shorter.
Right?
Okay.
So it's better. We improved it. And honestly, it's going to keep getting better. So we're just working at it. So I mean,
Okay.
faster the better. Definitely. We want to see that. Yeah.
Okay.
And honestly, I know we've been on this call for almost 2 hours now.
No, wow.
can-
This is priceless.
When
This
you
is, wow,
when
doctor.
you
Thank you.
when you look at a result after looking at a few of them, you can look at it and know what you're going to do in 5 minutes. Like it's not, it takes time. There's a learning curve, right? Like it's all, when you're learning new information, it takes a while. Okay.
Okay. No.
Thank you so much, Nancy.
Doctor, thank you very, very much. It's been priceless. And all your very good explaining and going through everything, and the test is, wow, it's amazing. Now that you explained it, we understand.
My pleasure.
And so appreciate very much your time, your patience, everything. It was awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Lacey.
Thank you.
And
Everyone's
Mariana. Yeah, Mariana, real quickly, I'm going to send you guys a follow-up email with just the different things that we talked about with the BiomeFX, but then also with the products that you mentioned today.
Perfect.
And so should I just send that directly to Sarah, your assistant, and then she'll share it with the group, or?
Yes, or in the chat, I'm going to put the email that arrives to all of us at the same time. That's
Okay, perfect.
At NutriWhiteSalute.com. NutriSNW at NutriWhiteSalute.com. And that we all receive it. Okay.
Perfect.
I'll
Okay,
send the
thank
recording. Give me 10 minutes or so for the recording to buffer, and then we'll send it to you.
Of course.